From the basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sports Vault. Jersey Joe Archino back here, and obviously this weekend in college football, you couldn't get too far without kind of mentioning Clemson taking on Louisville, and my thoughts about the game leading up to it were this really was going to be a game where experience was going to be the determining factor in the outcome. And I think largely when you look at it, when it's all said and done, Clemson comes out on top 42-36. And that was the very thing that was the outcome and the determining factor in this football game. Clemson obviously jumped out to that big lead. Louisville takes it back and Clemson rallies. But I think when you look at the cycle of that game, the way that it happened, experience was really the only thing that explains it all. And obviously because Clemson, they have the composure early because they've been in big games like this before. Deshaun Watson has been on the biggest stage under the biggest lights in the national championship game. His team, they build that lead. Louisville rallies, but when it comes down to it, closing it out, Deshaun Watson is able to get it done, and obviously, it was kind of the game we've all been waiting for Deshaun Watson to have this season. His stats weren't the prettiest coming into this game. Clemson had been winning and had won all their games, but we didn't have a signature Deshaun Watson performance, and I do think even with the 3 interceptions he threw in the game, the 5 touchdowns, orchestrating the offense when it meant the most, it's just that thing that seals the deal, and it was that signature performance that we had wanted and that we needed to see from Deshaun Watson. And obviously, when we kind of look at the way that the ACC has unfolded this season, the conference is very, very strong. Florida State, there's a lot of people who I respect a lot in this industry, in the college football world, who love Florida State, who picked them to win the national championship. But it no longer is really the case there. They lose to North Carolina this weekend. There's a lot more uncertainty there than I think we all thought there would be at the start of the season. And clearly Louisville, this is not a loss that will hurt them by any means. Lamar Jackson didn't have his best game throwing the football, but I don't think that's what we've come to expect from Lamar Jackson. Yes, he was putting up video game type numbers with the running the ball, with throwing the ball, and he is a quarterback capable of doing both things, but where he is at his best is using his athleticism, using his legs, and that's really where he did hurt them the most in this game. 162 rushing yards for him, 2 rushing touchdowns for him, 1 through the air, and then 1 pick as well. But Lamar Jackson obviously has that big-time ability. He hadn't been in a situation like this, and to me, that's why I went with Clemson in this game. And why I think a lot of people went with Clemson in this game is you just had that more degree of certainty because a lot of the players on Clemson, obviously Dabo Swinney included, have played in these huge games like this before, and that experience level between 2 really great quarterbacks. To me, if I have to find things to separate them to win a football game, experience really does come down to being the determining factor many of the times, and this was one of the ones where it really was one of those times. But again, it had the look and it had the feel of being a playoff game, and it did in every conceivable way really feel like it was. You had sloppiness on both sides, both teams at times. You had turnovers on both sides at times. It wasn't the prettiest. It was just a game you have to get through. It's a survival of the fittest game, both throwing their best punches at each other, both throwing whatever they have to try to get by, and the team with the more experience, who had been in many situations like this before, won and came out on top. And to me, that wasn't a surprise at all. But again, you look at kind of the way that the teams are going to be ranked from here, and it doesn't really come to any surprise at all. I don't think this will hurt Louisville, and Clemson only has it themselves to improve and get better from here with. And obviously now, Clemson has a tough road game against Florida State coming up, but again, we don't look at Florida State with the same regard we did at the beginning of the season. DeAndre Francois has obviously done some nice things, but even with him, he's learning on the fly, and it seems like on a game-in, game-out basis, the adjustments come, and sometimes he has to go back, look at the film, and learn things, and learn from the mistakes. But not as many mistakes made, and not as many that aren't easily recognizable with Watson and then with Lamar Jackson. This was just a really well-played football game, and experience, of course, was the factor. But the conversation now kind of obviously shifts to, can Clemson win the national championship this season, and can Louisville win the national championship this season? Now, we're obviously, all eyes are still on Alabama because they haven't lost, but I just don't think Bama will do it this year. Bama did it last year, obviously. Ohio State did it the year before that. But when I look at Alabama, I mean, it's hard to argue with the results, and Nick Saban is a guy who certainly gets a lot of them. But when I look at Alabama, I don't think that the way that they've won has always been the most convincing. Obviously, their week 1 against USC, they really own that game from the start to the end. But other than that, it has been a struggle. Their schedule is a tremendous difficult, like it always is with all the teams that they face off. It's just the nature of the SEC. It's the nature of the schedule they always play. But in sequence this season, it's different. Usually Nick Saban has a schedule, and the way it's set up is between the tremendous gauntlet of the SEC, there's a breather or there's a bye or something like that, but that comfort is not there this season. I think there's just going to be a moment. Now, they very well still could get in the playoff, and I think a lot of people probably don't expect them to lose more than a game. I don't expect them to lose more than a game in the regular season, but to win it all right now, I look at it, and I don't think that they will. I think with Alabama, even coming into the season for them, it's so easy to look past it now because of the great start that they've had, but there was a lot of uncertainty coming into the season for Alabama with off-the-field issues for players, legal issues for certain players, and I do think at the end of the day, that's going to come back to bite them. Now, we kind of go and we look at the team right behind them in the new rankings. Ohio State, to me, has the very making. I really liked Ohio State as my national champion before the season started. And a lot of people didn't, for the simple reason that Urban Meyer just didn't return a lot of starters. And historically in college football, you don't win the national championship unless you return at least 10 starters. And Urban Meyer just didn't return a lot of big time, big name guys. He loses guys to the NFL, and other things are a part of that. But to me, the position he did return a starter in, and it's the most important position of all, is J.T. Barrett. Obviously, J.T. Barrett puts up huge numbers against Rutgers, now becomes Ohio State's leading all-time touchdown thrower. But when I look at it, I do think that Urban Meyer's teams mature over the course of a season very quickly. When we look at the way that they won the inaugural national championship college football playoff, I think when we looked at it, obviously, there were so many things that just went wrong for Urban Meyer's team that season. Before the season even started, Braxton Miller is out for the year. J.T. Barrett gets thrown into the fire, struggles. They lose a game to Virginia Tech. He struggles his first game against Navy, but he composes himself, he rallies, and then they go on an incredible run. They beat Michigan State convincingly, which we considered at that time to really be probably the best team in the Big Ten. But now, then, obviously, J.T. Barrett gets hurt. They throw Cardale Jones into the mix, and then the rest is history from there. Cardale Jones leads them to the national championship. They beat Oregon. They beat Alabama the game before that. So Urban Meyer's teams obviously can do things and can learn on the fly, can grow and mature, and can just rewrite what's conventional knowledge. And I think, to me, that's the reason that I didn't discount Ohio State, because of the simple fact that they don't return a lot of starters. They return the most important one, and that is at the quarterback position. That is J.T. Barrett. I do think, if I had to put my money on it, that Ohio State will end up winning the national championship. And obviously, there's still a lot of college football left to be played. We still have to watch them play against the likes of Michigan. But even when I look at Michigan, I think, again, the biggest separation in Ohio State, to me, has clearly established themselves and separated themselves from everyone else in the Big Ten. Even Michigan, with Michigan not losing a game yet. I just look at Michigan offensively, and there's no way that I think they could hang toe-to-toe with Ohio State. Their defense is definitely better. They have so many tremendous playmakers on defense, one of the best in the country, but when it comes down to it in college football, the biggest games are all coming down to being shootouts. You look at the national championship last season, Alabama, I think a lot of us picked them as the winner. A lot of us were very split on that game, but a lot of us went with Alabama because we just felt that the size of their players, being in the SEC, having a defense like they have, going up constantly against the biggest of the biggest, we thought their defense was going to cause Clemson the biggest problems they faced all year on offense. But that wasn't the case. That was an offensive game all the way. Alabama won that game behind offense, and that's the line we've really seen become a more of a pattern. It is becoming more and more custom, even in the SEC, for these biggest games to turn into shootouts. Ole Miss Alabama this season, what was that? It was a shootout. I mean, I think even the conventional defenses are showing you now that in the big games, you have to have a quarterback who can get you down the field quickly and who can continually pour points on the board. And with Michigan, I just don't see that happening when they play Ohio State. I think defensively, they will give them problems, but when it comes down to it, JT Barrett's going to get his, and I just don't know if Michigan would be able to return the favor. But it started talking about that tremendous game we had with Clemson and Louisville. It shifted a little bit to who we think the national champion will be. I am curious who everyone thinks at this point in the season who their national champion would be. There's still a lot left to be played, but we've certainly seen enough now where a clear picture is emerging of what our outcome might very well look like. Until the next time, though, Jersey Joe Archino here at the Sports Vault. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Archino and on Instagram, Jersey_Joe_Archino. And I'll catch everybody in the next episode.